On today's podcast, we will be discussing job analysis and job evaluations and how they can play a significant role in an employer's workforce.
Retain Ohio is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor and the Social Security Administration under a grant award to the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. 100% of grant funding is from U.S. federal funds. The RETAINCares podcast does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Labor or the Social Security Administration, nor does mention of trade names, commercial product, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of RETAINCares, Safekeeping Employee Health. I am one of your hosts, Dina Zidian, Referral and Enrollment Supervisor for Retain Ohio.
Hi, everybody. This is Christina Feathers. I am also your other host. I'm the Education and Training Supervisor for the Retain program. Super excited to be having the podcast today. Later on, we will have a wonderful guest named Amy Smith joining us. She is an occupational therapist, and we're going to talk a little bit about work assessments with her. So, Dina, do you mind starting out by telling me a little bit about what a job analysis is?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of listening to the Retain TA podcast, and their special guest that they had on their podcast was Dr. Joe Ashley, and he is a business engagement specialist. During his 3 podcasts that he recorded, he went over how performing a job analysis and a job assessment were beneficial to employers, especially if they wanted to hire someone with a disability. So a job analysis, it can be used to identify areas where an employee needs training. Since a job analysis makes it clear to understand about core duties and responsibilities of a job, it also can be used to hire someone with that disability. It provides information to develop suitable training materials for a job to be performed by an employee after completion of their training. And it also can be used, like I said, when you're trying to tweak a job basically so it could fit for somebody else. Because a lot of times jobs are not universal, meaning that this piece of equipment is made the same way for every single person that performs that job task. Although some people are taller, some people are shorter, their reach is different. So with that aspect of looking at equipment or, working on an assembly line or something like that, the height of the assembly line is a standard measurement and does not fit every single person. So a job analysis is a good way to figure out how the job can be tweaked to fit everyone.
Thank you. So Retain uses job analysis as a service strategy. So they can be used to help a worker who may be ill or injured and wants to stay on the job by helping them with tasks and remaining productive by analyzing what their job requires of them.
Correct. There are 7 of us now actually ergonomically certified that can go into a workplace and kind of get a visual idea of what could be changed to fit either an injured employee that may be returning to work, or if an employer is interested in hiring someone with a disability, how they could possibly make the workstation fit for that new employee as well. Also, I wanted to go over real quick what a job evaluation is and how it's different than the analysis. With a job evaluation, it's a process of valuing or determining how much is to be paid for a job, and it's mainly used when a specific job or a single job is to be evaluated, or when there are different jobs in the same workplace. So when there's a job based on a project or a piecework, something like that, the job analysis has its own importance in concluding like compensation, remuneration, salary, things like that. And it's a process as well. It identifies area where the employee needs training, things like that is similar to what the analysis does, but it goes a little bit deeper than just analyzing what the job is. So let's talk again about what Dr. Ashley had to say in the podcast, because I found him very interesting in his strategy of looking at how a job analysis and a job assessment can work for an employer.
Yeah, I completely agree. So there was one key point that stuck out to me, and It was said that if a worker returns to a manufacturing job with loss of strength in their hands, their workstation could be modified to include additional clamps to hold a pipe or other work material in place, which provides additional stability while working on a finishing process. So, with that being said, I think job analysis and the ergonomic assessments that we currently offer for the Retain program go hand in hand together. So that way we can analyze the required skills and the current workspace to determine if modifications at all are needed.
Correct. And sometimes they're called vocational assessments. It helps not only the employee, I think we have to remember it also brings value and confidence to the employer because they are willing to work with their current workforce and see what assessment can be done to help either an employee return to work, like I said, hire a new employee that maybe have some sort of disability. So I know Dr. Ashley used another example as well, and it was about working with a food production manufacturer, and they wanted to hire people with a disability. They had a person come in that did vocational instruction, and they performed the assessment. There was also a physical therapist that also came in to do work capacity building, and they broke down the job to see how long standing, kneeling, things like that were required for the job. They put together samples for the employer to see if the job could be done differently. And the employer said at the end of the day, the job has to be done in a way that it is just like everyone else doing the job, whether this person was in a wheelchair or maybe, it was someone coming back that had a surgery on their knee or back or whatever. At the end of the day, the job had to get done in the same capacity as everyone else. And what the employer found after he looked at the assessment was that this job actually could be tweaked in a way that not only the job could be done more efficiently for everybody else, but it could be done for a person with a disability. And it actually was beneficial for the entire workforce, not just for the person he was trying to hire with a disability. And this company did hire, I think they said 5 or 6 people actually were hired that had a disability, and they are all still working there today. And some of them actually were promoted. So it's a very strong tool to have that vocational assessment and, the job analysis handy for the employer to use.
Yeah, and a job analysis is a detailed examination of the tasks that make up a job, so the employee's role, the condition under which an employee is performing his or her job, and what exactly a job requires in terms of aptitudes, attitudes, knowledge, skills, qualifications, and physical working conditions of the employee. So, a job analysis works to determine the most effective methods for performing a job, to increase employee job satisfaction, to identify core areas for giving training to employees and to find out best methods of training, to develop the performance measurement systems, and to match job specifications with employee specifications.
So, with that being said, if you were to take your job and try to figure out, you don't have a physical job, I don't have a physical job. But there was one key thing that you just said that really people don't think about, and that is the mental capacity that it takes to perform a job. A lot of people just look at, well, this physical job is, and they have a disability. And so how physically can they do this job? A lot of the jobs, a lot of the time, are mental. It's being able to do problem solving and things like that. And I don't think that always comes out when people are thinking about changing a job description to fit everyone. So going back to job analysis, what is the intention behind job analysis? There's questions that can be asked when performing a job analysis. And that includes, what is the need of the job to exist? So an employer looking at that question might really have to look at the job that's being performed, determine if it is a job that does need to exist, or is there another job that the task could be added to that other job. So that is something that is included in the job analysis. What physical and mental activities does the worker undertake? There we go back to the mental activities. Many jobs, like I said, include both physical and mental activities when they're being performed. I don't, like I said, think a lot of employers look at the mental capacity of someone to see if that is something that they are capable of doing. But it is part of the job analysis. And I think it's an important part to make sure that someone is mentally able to handle a workload. If you are working on a conveyor belt and you have things coming at you very quickly, you mentally have to be able to know next steps without even thinking about it. Don't you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And also, it's important to note that a job analysis can be used to help identify maybe areas where, people are needing additional support or training. So maybe everything's going well, but maybe a person has, a lower workload or lower outcomes than somebody else. A job analysis could come in and, almost determine the why behind that, and then help to identify areas for improvement.
Right. I think people don't realize also that a job analysis is, when is the job performed? Where is the job performed? It's about the environment the job is performed in as well. So, for example, if you are working in a warehouse and there's poor lighting, now how would that affect your work performance? Especially if if maybe you're in your 40s or 50s and your eyesight's going a little bit, and if it's a dimmer lighting, you have a hard time seeing. What if you were to pull a certain product off a shelf, but you can't read the label because it's too dark? That's part of the job analysis, determining like if the lighting, the temperature of the room, all of that could be affecting someone's job performance.
That makes sense. And it's very interesting to see everything that goes into play for a job analysis. So there's lots of things that a person could look at. And like we said before, even taking a look at the job description can come down to determining even if you have the right people in the right seats. And these are all the tasks that somebody trained to do a job analysis could come in and determine.
Exactly. I know with Dr. Ashley, when he was interviewed, um, he called it a strategy when performing a vocational assessment. And it's just collecting all the information in a way that identifies jobs for one specific individual. Also looking at, can the person complete the job? Is there a modification that's needed? Is there additional training that's needed? All of those things. Assessments are a return to work tool that can be used to make sure the individual has a good job fit, like you said. And good timing to use this strategy is when you are looking at retain. Retain can come in and perform these duties as well. Maybe not in the in-depth way that a physical therapist could do it. We don't look at them and examine the person. That's the job of the provider that they have. But when the provider sets what the modifications are that are needed for this person to return, that's when retain can come in and possibly look at the workstation and see, like, this is something that they can come back to, as long as they maybe had a mat under their feet, a stool to rest their feet on, different times of day they could work, or maybe shorter hours, more breaks, things like that.
Yep, and these assessments build on the strengths of the worker. So especially if somebody's been injured or fallen ill, a work assessment will identify their strengths and the strategies that will best support them returning to work or staying at work until it meets a full capacity. So when a work assessment can help the business needs and also have the ill or injured worker in the back of their mind, those options all benefit the employee and the employer. So a work assessment can be done to enhance employee morale.
Yeah, and I think every employer needs that, especially after COVID. I think employee morale was really low, especially when there were so many people that had to come back that had COVID and, weren't sure if they can perform the job that they were doing before they had COVID. That is definitely something to look at.
In the past 7 months, Retain Ohio has enrolled over 700 patients from the Toledo, Cincinnati, and Youngstown regions. If you have been hurt outside of work and are experiencing a musculoskeletal injury or an acute cardiovascular event, contact Retain Ohio today. Give us a call at 1-833-4-RETAIN.
And now we would like to bring out this month's special guest, Joining us today, we have Amy Smith. Amy, thank you so much for joining us on the RETAINCares podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
Amy, do you mind just starting out by telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. I am an occupational therapist. I have been working for almost 40 years. The last 20 years of that have been with on-site therapy, dealing with injured workers. So my experience is with transitional work therapy, traditional occupational therapy at the work site, and then also ergonomic assessments, functional capacity evaluations, job analysis, and all the other pieces that go along with return to work.
That's awesome. And I was able to visit actually the site that Amy works at, and the way that it is ran and what they do with their staff is amazing. And I thank you for that, Amy, for letting us come and visit. As I had mentioned earlier in the podcast, there are 7 of us that are also ergonomically certified to do those ergonomic assessments. And it was us going to be able to see in person how it affects the workers was really special. So thank you for that. I wanted to know, this podcast in general talks a lot about job analysis and job assessments. I wanted to know your view on how you see those job analysis and assessments playing a key role in hiring those with disabilities.
Well, I think that it's really hard to match anybody to a job, let alone somebody with disabilities, if we don't know what the actual components are of that job. By doing the functional job analysis, we literally are breaking down all the components that are required to perform that job. Everything from lifting, pushing, pulling, to manipulations, to attention span, to sitting, standing, and it gives us all of the little minute details that we can compare to the way somebody is able to function and see if they're a match for that job. It also is a way for us to look at modifications or accommodations if it's necessary as well.
That's interesting. I know we had talked about the steps of the job analysis prior also, and doing the organizational analysis, and choosing the jobs to be analyzed, and collecting the data, then doing like the job specifications, and then tweaking the job description. There's a lot involved. There's a lot of steps involved.
There is, and it's a really nice way to get on site and to really understand what the jobs are. When we're working with anyone with an injury or a disability, I think most providers do it from an office or a clinic. And if we can get in to do the job analysis itself, it lets you just see the general culture in an employee's environment. And then it really gives you a better understanding, I think, of understanding what the components are, of the job are, and what's really required of them to do. People aren't always accurate in describing what their jobs are, and they're either very vague about it, or we get descriptions of, I lift 250 pounds all day long, where it may actually be an accumulation of 250 pounds throughout the day. So, everyone's interpretation is different. And just to have the eyes on site and be able to see all of that, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, the factual evidence that, you gather and the data, I'm sure, helps to further determine what the actual role is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Amy, could you describe to me the actual process of an ergonomic assessment?
So when I do an ergonomic assessment, I literally go in and meet with the supervisors, and I take a walk through the facility and just kind of get a feel for the whole practice, because that gives us an idea of, we don't want to just look at their job alone, because there might be other aspects going on around them from another job that would be helpful in their accommodation if something was necessary. So it just helps to get like a lay of the land. And then we want to talk about the employer's injury and any of their musculoskeletal disorder issues. If they're having, if there's certain areas of their facility where they are seeing more injuries, or that would be where we want to focus, is where the higher risk of injury would be. In the case where I am on site, we literally go over and assess it as somebody has an injury to see if there's another way that we can accommodate it. But when you're going in for the first time, it just reviewing like OSHA logs and things like that can even help identify the areas where the ergonomic improvement process could happen. It's also really important to talk to the employees, because the people who are doing the job are the ones that are usually standing there saying, wow, if this was just done this way, this would feel much better, because they are literally doing that job, throughout their whole shift. And if something is bothering them, or if they just, sometimes they're just creative and they can see another way for it to happen. That's where the best ergonomic improvement happens, is getting the information from someone who is sitting there just, doing it all day long.
Yeah. This is how I was told to do it, but this is how I actually do it kind of helps you to determine which way is the better way of doing it.
Absolutely. And, we have to always consider, productivity. We can't interfere with the company's goals either.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's just like a real simple change, and it makes everybody's life so much easier. We're looking at ergonomic risk factors. So we're considering, which things are high task repetition, which things might just require a lot of force when they're doing it. I see in assembly jobs especially, there can be a lot of repetitive and awkward postures. And so when they're put together, that's what can cause a lot of wrist and hand injuries. So we want to look at what they're doing that is not the best body mechanics. And then looking at how they have modified what they're doing, because that's always, just watching them work. Sometimes they stand differently, they pull differently, they grip differently. And so when we look at all those things, it helps us identify where the actual risk factors are.
Wow, thank you so much. And, so this really just opened my eyes. So an ergonomic assessment not only is used when somebody has an injury, but also it is used by companies to help prevent injuries from even happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if we're doing our job right, I shouldn't be a therapist anymore, because we're preventing all these injuries from happening. And, it's like accidents still happen. Medical issues still happen, but if we can really go in and reduce the ergonomic impact of it, we keep our people longer. So it really makes a big difference if we can be preventative, and it keeps your costs down. It keeps you putting money where you could use it more productively, maybe to buy new equipment, or to, reward people for, their hard work financially, with raises and things like that, instead of spending it on, injury rehabilitation and preventive. But the preventative things help to do that. So.
Definitely. And I know you had mentioned about seeing certain employees maybe do things differently to make it more comfortable for themselves. How have you seen workplace assessments assist the employers and the employees? I know you had mentioned cost effectiveness. for the employers, but can you give us an actual example of how you've seen it be a benefit to the employer and employee?
I think the biggest thing is that it boosts employee morale. I do a lot of work with what we call the psychosocial impacts of return to work. And that is just, the what's going on with the employee themselves, the impact of enjoying coming to work, of having a social presence when they're at work, of we spend so much of our work day or of our day at work, that it needs to be a pleasant experience for everybody. And there's a lot of companies I go into where the employees feel like they're not taken care of. And just by doing some of these things and seeing, the process happen, employees feel empowered and that they have a say in something. And it doesn't matter that they're a line worker or they could be the engineer. It just, if they feel like they are a part of the process, then it really just helps the overall morale and culture of the company itself. I've also seen companies where when they weren't feeling taken care of, if an employee had an injury, they literally went to an attorney before they went to a doctor to be evaluated.
Oh, wow.
And I think that says a lot for, like the trust component. And like they didn't trust their employer, but, had they had somebody that was in there and talking to them and getting their input and helping to make those, modifications to their workstation, I think that some of that goes away too. And so, the financial impact isn't even always a big deal. I mean, it doesn't always have to cost a lot of money to make ergonomic changes. But, the morale and the cultural impact by the employees feeling like they're being taken care of is huge.
Right. And I know one of the questions I had for you was about employee morale with the companies that you work for. Once you started to offer these services, did you see a big change in the employee morale as far as when you first walked into a place of business and how the employees were behaving and maybe their mentality about coming to work compared to after you've been there several months and then you're looking at the employees and seeing smiles on their faces and things like that? Were you actually able to see that change?
Absolutely. The one company I've been at for 7 years, and I'm in there part-time. So, I'm not even there. I'm there 2 days a week, but, there's the other 3 days a week that they're in operation. And, they now have, when I walk through the plant, people come up and talk to me. They come up to me with suggestions. They come up to me and tell me when something might be bothering them. I hear a lot from them too. I mean, like it feels like a safe environment for them to come talk to me about a concern that they're hurting or that something's going on. That's been a huge change. When I first went in there, it was actually somebody else who was their safety manager, but their environment was that, oh, you'll be okay. Let's just figure out, you just, wait a few days and we'll see how you feel, kind of thing. So people were afraid to even report that they were hurting.
Right.
And now that has totally turned around where it doesn't matter which area of the plant. It can be in production. It can be in shipping. It could be, anywhere in the plant. They all realize that if something doesn't feel right, they have some say in making a change there.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I can say for sure because I don't have, their numbers in front of me, but I know that they don't have the call-offs that they were having.
Right.
And that's especially when, a lot of companies right now are having a hard time maintaining employees or hiring, with our job market the way it is. It's important that the people that we have there need to come to work, and if it's going to reduce call-offs because they're not hurting, or they know that if something is going on they can make a change with it, then I think that's a really big impact for employers for sure.
Yeah, not only for the employers, but the employee as well. Each time, a call off occurs for whatever the reason may be, that individual, loses some money out of their pocket, and then the employer
Mm-hmm.
also is losing some money. So it sounds like across the board, it helps to increase, earnings.
Yeah, and it also saves their sick time for when they're really sick, or when, or their vacation time for doing something pleasant and not just calling off because, to cover themselves too. So
Yeah.
that's a big benefit for an employee for sure. Yeah.
So who do you recommend utilize workplace assessments?
Everyone.
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Yeah, I have. It's such a win-win situation for everyone involved. It is for the employer and it is for the employee. It helps providers. It helps our doctors, know that they can, send somebody to work with restrictions and that there will be accommodation for them. It helps their families know that they're going to work in a safe environment. But I think that one of the biggest barriers for doing workplace assessments is that the employers feel it is too time consuming. And in our busy, productive world, there isn't time to do all of this. Mm-hmm. And the time investment is really not as great as as people think it's going to be. And I think that's what's, that's the recommendation I would make, is to just give it a shot, just to see, because the impact on the other end, just, to invest a few hours into taking a look at what's going on. Most of the time, the people that come in and they're doing your assessment are the ones doing all the work. It really only takes, a tour and, a little bit of answering questions and observations. And then the rest of it comes from, the person that you're bringing in to do those actual assessments. And the modifications or accommodations, a lot of times, like I said, are not even costly. But and if you have, a lot of companies, especially in manufacturing, have like a machine shop. A lot of the stuff can be done in-house, and changes can be made that have that big impact on everybody being happy at work on the other end. So that's why it really is important for everybody.
Right. And I don't think people realize also, Amy, and maybe you can dig into this a little bit deeper, it's not always manufacturing companies that can use an ergonomic assessment. There are different ergonomic assessments for office workers than there are for manufacturing workers, that there are for healthcare workers. And I don't think people or employers realize that they could take advantage of this ergonomic assessment.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have employees, you would benefit from it. People think that office work is light duty. I'm air quoting here, but it's sedentary work, and it really isn't hard. But I think that all the people working from home learned a lot of that, excuse me, over COVID, because if you don't have the proper setup, that makes a huge impact on your physical well-being while you're at work. We can set people up at a desk and have the proper setup, and if they don't get up and move throughout an 8-hour workday, they can be as much at risk for an injury as somebody who's in a steel mill. I mean, it's just because it's not the heavy physical work demands, or a lot of moving parts, doesn't mean that they're not at risk for injury. So, in any kind of employment setting, they can benefit from it.
Absolutely. Did you have any other items that you wanted to add that people could learn about ergonomic assessments or job analysis?
I just really think that, accommodation always sounds so intimidating. And I think that's just what we have to keep in mind, is that it really doesn't need to be a hard thing. It's just an unknown. And as long as we can, just be open-minded and think about other ways to try to do something, we can have a very happy and healthy work environment. And so I think it's just important that we kind of take this off the shelf, because I think it's been put on the shelf and people just think they know that there's ergonomics out there, or they think they're doing it well. But if they still have employees that are going home tired at the end of the day, or they're hurting, then there's some room somewhere for some change, and it's just a good opportunity for them.
Yeah. Wow. Amy, thank you so much. This was beyond informative and helpful for our listeners and for ourselves. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to meet with us.
Oh, I was happy to do it. I like to share my information.
So if anybody listening is wondering, we currently, like Dina said, have 7 individuals trained to do ergonomic assessments. These would be done free of charge. So if you're an employer and you'd like to sign up to be a Retain-friendly employer, this is something that we would be able to offer you.
Yep, absolutely. And Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. And you were just so helpful. If anyone has any questions about what Amy covered, please just reach out. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
Participants in the Retain Ohio program are between the ages of 18 and 65, have been hurt outside of work, and are not currently utilizing Social Security disability insurance. To see if you qualify for the care coordination services that Retain provides, give us a call to speak with our enrollment specialist at 1-833-4-RETAIN. That's 1-833-4-RETAIN.
Wow, Dina, Amy was so great. I'm so happy we were able to have the opportunity to learn from her and talk with her.
Yeah, me too. Like I said, she's an occupational therapist, and when we had talked about what Dr. Joe Ashley had discussed as far as vocational assessments, that's pretty much who you would want to be doing those vocational assessments, is someone like Amy, or a physical therapist. But she literally, even though the place that I had visited when I did get to meet with her was someplace that she was only at a couple days a week, she talked about that employee morale, and my goodness, they do exactly what she said. The employees walk up to her and say, "Hey, I'm feeling better." That change we made, in the height of the machine really made a difference. And she's like, I'm happy to hear it. I know the place that I went to, they also had a massotherapist coming in at least once a week, to have anybody on their lunch break or their 15-minute break that they got to come over and get their shoulders worked on, their hands worked on, whatever they needed. And that was something that Amy brought in. And it was, she said that, it's very beneficial to have even that massotherapist come in and work on people, because they need it. And she's something. She's really special.
Yeah. And like she said, the cost of making these improvements or changes essentially helps you save more money in the long run. I know a lot of employers, probably even just like hearing what you said about a massotherapist, might think, we can't afford to do so, or we can't implement this change because it's not cost effective. But overall, all of these employers that implement these job analysis or job assessment recommendations save lost time, and they have more quality improvements and more quality products coming out of their employees, because that employee morale is in turn increased.
Right. And if you think about it, a massotherapist, maybe they charge, $30 to $50 an hour for a massage, or to do the therapy on the person. And maybe they're there for a 4-hour day. So even if they're charging $50 an hour, that's only $200. Do you know how much more you would save keeping that person from going on leave of absence because of an injury? So just like you said, it pays off in the long run to provide these services for your employees.
I was just going to say that, the Retain Project helps to have a positive health outcome for people that have had an injury or illness outside of work, but we've also come to join with many employers and we want them to feel that same positivity. So we want them to feel like their employees are, having great morale and enjoying being at work. They want to come back to work.
Right. Getting rid of that employee versus employer mindset, as I always say. That's what Retain really tries to do. And we are available and still reaching out to employers in the Cincinnati, Youngstown, and Toledo regions. We currently, I believe, have 178 employers enrolled. We've been meeting almost daily with different employers to talk about Retain and what it can do for their companies and their employees. If any employer is interested, you can always email us at mh-retain-dept@mercy.com and send us over your information and we'll get a hold of you. We do have social media as well, and there is, I believe, a way to respond to us on our social media sites. So we are on LinkedIn and Facebook with the RETAINCares, or Retain Ohio, sorry, is what you would look for on those websites.
Yeah. Well, Dina, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to add before we wrap it up this week? I really enjoyed talking about job analyses and assessments with you.
Yeah, it's probably one of my favorite topics. I'm very happy when I hear a company is growing and prospering because they're taking care of their employees. So doing these job analysis and assessments really is the key, I feel like, to keeping a happy workforce. So I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us. And if anyone has any questions, again, 1-833-4-RETAIN or mh-retain-dept@mercy.com.
All right. Thank you, Dina. That's a wrap.
Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.
Retain Ohio is funded by the U.S. Department of Labor and the Social Security Administration under a grant award to the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. 100% of grant funding is from U.S. federal funds. The RETAINCares podcast does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the U.S. Department of Labor or the Social Security Administration, nor does mention of trade names, commercial product, or organizations imply endorsement by the U.S. government.